This just in. Let's get to the latest on the Yankees and their signing or coming to an agreement with Andruw Jones. Jack, we talked about this last week. Would it happen? Who would be the veteran that would come in? It's Jones is the guy.
Right, they've been looking for that fourth outfielder, a guy who could hit from the right-handed side, and they finally got it in Andruw Jones. This was first reported by John Heyman of Sports Illustrated. I was able to confirm it that, yes, it is a done deal. It's 1 year for $2 million. He has the chance to earn $1.2 million in incentives. And, Bob, we talked about it last week. This is a smart move for the Yankees, I think, because Jones is a guy who can still hit left-handed pitching. His OPS against lefties last year was over 900. We see he had 19 homers for the White Sox, and more importantly, you can put him in any spot in the outfield. Is he still the 10-time Gold Glove winner? No, he's not, but you can put him out there, and unlike Marcus Thames, you can put him out there and believe he's going to make the play.
Yeah, see, we were talking about that, Tyler. That's the key. You had to have a guy that could back up in the outfield, not just a guy who can hit and not show up out there or drop balls, and Jones is that guy.
Right, exactly. I mean, you look at last year and you think, well, Tim's is not a problem, but this is kind of what the Yankees do. Yeah, sure, Tim's was pretty good, but can we improve on it with Andruw Jones? And they went ahead and did that. And it's interesting. Another guy who once had a great World Series against the Yankees comes and joins the Yankees. It seems to happen a lot.
All right, let's turn the page now to other news of the week for the Yankees. And, Jack, you were at the press conference when they announced that they had signed the reliever, Rafael Soriano. It's an interesting deal, to say the least, but it certainly fortifies that bullpen.
Right, it was a deal that came together quickly. We see the numbers on Soriano last season, and here's a guy, Bob, who was arguably the best closer in the American League last season, and now he's going to pitch the 8th inning for the Yankees. Joe Girardi was giddy as he talked about the luxury of having 2 closers, basically, in his bullpen. And what this also does is, I mean, this makes the entire bullpen a lot stronger because guys like Robertson and Jabba Chamberlain, you now look at them for roles in the 6th and 7th innings.
All right, now let's, having said that, let's get to a question from Devon Kaysen via Facebook about the bullpen. Tyler, I'll tee you up with it. Do you think we have the best bullpen in baseball now?
I think they probably do. I mean, the Oakland A's have really beefed up their bullpen, and we can't forget the great job that San Diego did out in the National League last year. But it sure looks at it. I mean, you look at some of those names and what those guys can do, the 2 lefties. We know Jabba and Robertson, Soriano and Rivera. And you have to give the Yankees credit to some degree in the sense that they've tried to get this setup man Rivera combination right for a long time. It didn't really work with Steve Carsey. Certainly didn't work with Kyle Farnsworth. Worked to some extent with Tom Gordon, but they just keep going after these top relief pitchers and putting them in the setup role before Rivera, which is no shame in serving that capacity. You wonder sometimes, is it a little too much? Sure. I mean, he's making a lot of money. He's making closer money to set up, but it is the Yankees, and you know, one of these years, you'd think they're going to get that combination right.
Now, I know some of the other news coming out of this press conference was the fact that Brian Cashman had gone on the record as saying, well, I don't want to give up that draft pick for Rafael Soriano. That's what they have to do if they sign him. Jack, in the end game, having heard everything you heard at that press conference, was it that big of a story?
Well, Brian Cashman talked about it. That was the first question he was asked, and he said, yes, he didn't want to give up the draft pick, and he didn't like the idea of allocating that kind of money towards a setup man. But the other thing that he said, Bob, is, does this make our team better? He said, you bet it makes our team better. There are 29 other general managers who wish that they had a guy like Soriano pushed down their throat, was the way that he put it. So general managers make recommendations, and sometimes ownership steps in, and Brian Cashman said this, they decide, and in this instance, that's what happened.
All right, other news of the week is we looked at that graphic that showed the projected bullpen. We saw 2 guys out there, Jabba Chamberlain and Boone Logan. They were able to avoid arbitration. They signed, as did Phil Hughes, the starter who won 18 games last year. So 3 young pitchers back in, and I want to get to another question as it relates to Rafael Soriano here, Tyler. What does the Rafael Soriano signing mean for Jabba?
Well, it's not a good sign for Jabba. You got to acknowledge that. I mean, look, this is a team that's crying out for starting pitching right now, and Jabba's not going to be shifted to the rotation. It's a team that had a hole at setup relief. He's not going to fill that role, and he's not going to be Mariano Rivera's successor either, at least not at this stage. So it really puts him in that middle relief ground. And sure, you can have important innings in that role, but more often than not, you're going to be coming in after the team's trailing a little bit, coming in early as he did in the playoffs a couple times. He's really, I mean, to go from the number 3 prospect in baseball as he was in 2008 to where he is now, it's quite a come down for Jabba, and they're going to have to get him right or somehow boost his trade value.
Well, that's the thing, Jack. We've talked about this on the show and fielded questions from viewers about the fact that, do you trade him to try and get more starting pitching? What do you do with Jabba? Do you think he's better off being with the Yankees or somewhere else?
Well, you look at where he is now, and for the Yankees right now, he's a middle reliever. I'm sure in his mind he believes that he's better than that, and he should believe that, but he hasn't been able to prove that. And you look at the guy, Tyler says, the number 3 prospect in baseball. Look at where he was in 2007 when he came into games And now we fast forward to this year and just look at the Yankees signing guys to contracts this week. Phil Hughes and Jabba Chamberlain both were vying for the rotation before last spring training. Now let's look at the gap in their salaries. I mean, Hughes is making almost twice as much as Chamberlain, and Hughes is a guy who has a nice, cozy spot in the rotation. Meanwhile, Jabba Chamberlain is a guy who may be called on to pitch in the 5th or 6th inning.
All right, now we've talked about the bullpen. You see the guys that avoided arbitration there. Now let's talk about starting pitching. Mercifully, we didn't have to address Andy Pettitte right off the top of the shows we've done over the course of the past 4 or 5 shows, but there was, I guess, an inkling of Pettitte news. Tell us about that.
A crumb of optimism yesterday, Bob, delivered by Joe Girardi, who said that Andy Pettitte is throwing a baseball, that he is working out in case he decides he wants to come back. So a lot of people heard that and wondered, does Girardi know something? Is he throwing a little hint out there? I talked to some Yankee people who say there's still a level of optimism in the Yankee offices. You'd call it guarded optimism. They want to believe that Andy Pettitte might come back, but when you ask the Yankee officials, executives, do you have any concrete evidence, they still say that no, they don't have any evidence that he's definitely coming back.
Tyler, in your opinion, how much of a difference maker could Pettitte be for that rotation, given what they're trying to do this season?
I think it could be an enormous difference. You look what he did last year. He was an all-star, a legitimate all-star. I think he was 11-2 at the break and then missed a couple months and came back, and he was great. I mean, Andy Pettitte, at 38 years old, is still one of the best starting pitchers, around. He's a Yankee. He knows, he gets it. He understands everything that goes along with it. He would be enormous, especially when you look at the other options, which right now remain Ivan Nova and Sergio Mitre. There's just no comparison.
Now, do you go outside, given those guys are 4 and 5, at least as it stands? Yankees fans are talking about Justin Duchscherer. Armando Galarraga was DFA'd by the Detroit Tigers. Any truth to the rumors out there that one of these guys could come in, Jack?
Well, Duchscherer is a guy who auditioned for a couple of teams and had a private audition out on the West Coast. The Yankees weren't one of the teams there, so right off the bat, that can tell you they're not going to sign that guy. Galarraga is a guy that interests me only because he put up the innings last year. He's a guy who could eat some innings, and I wondered why the Tigers would cut him loose so quickly, but the Yankees aren't interested in him either. Brian Cashman said after he didn't get Cliff Lee, he preached patience, and he continues to hold form in there. He hasn't even decided to just sign a guy for insurance. I guess they look at a Galarraga and a Duchscherer, and they look at Mitre, and they think they're better off with Mitre on a very economical contract.